Manuel Torres es estratega militar y político, investigador en la Universidad Católica de Portugal, máster en estudios estratégicos para la Universidad de Reading, UK, experto en guerra híbrida e investigador en el Centro de Investigación del Instituto de Estudios Políticos de la Universidad Católica de Portugal. Desde 2013, Miguel trabaja con la OTAN y ha sido autor de diferentes publicaciones. Una Allied Multinational Joint Exercise de Joint Warfare Center. También ha prestado servicios como coordinador de entrega de capacidades de Capability Delivery Coordinator, como miembro de las divisiones de inversiones de defensa en la sede de la OTAN. Manuel Torres es secretario de Capability Defense Executive Board, cuya dirección ocupa en el secretario general de la OTAN y trabaja como analista político y militar.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I would like to thank the ISACA organization for inviting me as well. This is an important topic. Digital trust is key when we have to discuss democracy, because this is what we always, the last thing that we think about needs to be, what is the implication of digital trust to our democracies, to our regimes? And in this sense, I would like to bring you a talk. I'll take some time from your attention to speak to you about the implications of hybrid warfare in the cyberspace, the implications of certain threats in our regimes, and the dangers of falling into what we call in political science as totalitarian democracies. Democracies, as we know, there are two different democracies. The ones that we have, constitutionally designed, liberal democracies, and totalitarian democracies, where sovereignty expands and goes beyond what is acceptable, namely sometimes sovereignty over the cyberspace. And that's a danger that I would like to talk to you about. So we need to understand, when we discuss war, when we discuss what's going on in Ukraine and the effects in Europe, is there a strategy to all of this? Or is this just a mathematical random event and we are just trying to understand exactly, trying to interpret what's going on? So that's one question. The other question is to understand, why is China and Russia behaving in the cyberspace in such a way so different from our democracies? And the last question is understanding what is our Atlantic posture. Do we even have an Atlantic posture? So hybrid warfare is a complex mix of different elements. We're talking about conventional and unconventional wars. So wars conducted through conventional armies, and war conducted through rebellions and insurgencies. But it's more than that. It's the mixture of the cyberspace, the outer space, and all elements of the private sector. All the tools that Microsoft has to offer, connected with all the market that Alibaba can offer as well. It's all the domains of human expression combined in one way to achieve political objectives. So this hybrid strategy that we are feeling today more than ever targets the alliance cohesion and targets the European Union political resilience. And the resilience is exactly the topic that brings us here. It's how exactly does data ensures confidence on the system. Is it actually part of resilience, or is resilience just another terminology that the politicians invented? No. Resilience is exactly what brings us together, believing that we can trust our political architectures in order to share information freely between each other. And that's what the adversaries of democracy try to do, to break this trust in data, trust in political architectures. When we talk about military cyber war, there are a couple of issues. I've trained dozens of military officers in cyber war and cyber defense. And you wouldn't believe how many people would come to me and ask, what about the cyber bullets? Are there cyber bullets? What about cyber war? So what this illustrates is that there is a lack of understanding of what cyber war is. And the military confuse some of the times CIS defense, so the defense of the communication systems that are key for the logistics to work during a military campaign, and command and control of the operations, or what we call the C2. The command and control is absolutely vital because it's what connects the political intent to the operations in the theater. If that communication fails, then the control will collapse. But CIS is something else. CIS is the systems, is the secret networks, is the federation of systems that controls every single communication. And cyber war happens at these two levels, at the command and control, trying to break what is the political intention, and trying to infiltrate the secret networks in order to paralyze NATO alliance operations or any member's operation. The last red point above me. Is Article 5 expanded to the cyberspace? Can an attack on the cyberspace be considered an attack on all and trigger an Article 5 situation? Well, until last year, until 2022, I would have to be very creative to articulate an explanation that you would accept. Because there was nothing on the legality that the alliance would agree that would say, yes, indeed, it expands. However, the new strategic concept of NATO, highlighted in yellow on paragraph 25, states that a cumulative set of malicious cyber activities may be, if strong enough, may be enough to invoke Article 5. And an Article 5 situation, that's a World War III scenario. This is completely new, and this changes the entire set of war. How exactly, what would a scenario of war, of cyber war, look like in this respect? It would have to be an attack on our nation's critical infrastructures, and there are a few. We call them the SWET infrastructures. They are the sewage, they are the water systems, the electrical grids, and the transport control systems. If those SWET critical infrastructures are attacked, neutralized, or eroded, that would constitute a violation of Article 5, and we would have a World War III scenario. So this is how far we are in terms of cyber war. It's real, people. The World Economic Forum conducts several queries and several studies on how is the interaction and the reaction of the common people to cyber war. And it's funny because, I don't know if, maybe it's too small, I don't know if you can see. But what's interesting is that most people consider that an attack on our infrastructures to a cyber event is for sure one of the 5 most important attacks that they can think of. And that's important because people have a notion that actually data needs to be secure, that public infrastructures need to be protected, and that the politicians need to reserve investment from public budget in order to reinforce those infrastructures. So this is a good path because the knowledge of the public, if the military is not fantastic, the public for sure it's not amazing, but it's good at least that the World Economic Forum came to this conclusion. So we have several actors that we need to talk about. One of them are the hackers, white hats, gray hats, and black hats. And they're very important because we consider them as political actors. It's a controversial it's a controversial opinion, I'm sure, but I feel that they bring to the democratic debate something that is very particular. They are anti-revolutionists, and they are able to explore and exploit systems that we, the conventional planners, have not yet fully realized. So they are an important piece of all democracies, but I'll come to it after. We have several different hacking groups. This is nothing new for you. But when we plan exercises, we need to try to simulate what these groups had done in the past. So in the first row, we have decentralized anonymous. We have all the old school pirate groups. And then we have the most interesting ones, I think. It's the proxy-sponsored groups. Well, not all proxy-sponsored are owned by the military. Some of them are just decentralized groups being sponsored by the state, a state, for example, Russia, or India or Pakistan, and they bring together a new group and they form a kind of a conventional PMC, a conventional private military company operating in the cyberspace. Then we have the state-owned groups, nothing new, and of course the deep web, lone wolves, we know where they are. So to understand war in the cyberspace, we need to go back to Sun Tzu. And I know it's a cliche, but Sun Tzu, the worst form of war for Sun Tzu was to attack the enemy directly. The best form of war was to attack the enemy's plans. So if we transport this into the cyberspace, the best way in the cyberspace to attack the democracy, an enemy, an adversary, it's not necessarily to attack their systems, their command and control. No, it's to attack the heart and mind of democracy. And the heart and mind of democracy is the people. And what the people are sovereign, so what the people wish, it will be done. If not, there will be a revolution, and that's the way. So the adversaries of the West know this very well. And there's a long history of the evolution of war, which I will not bother you about. But it tells us a couple of things. It tells us that from Sun Tzu until today, the Chinese have evolved their strategic theory. They've used T. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom to add the mathematical factor, to add the biological and the psychology dimensions to their warfare. They've added Mao Zedong protracted warfare, which has to do with guerrilla. And then they added the unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare is the political expression of the government into maximum output of violence. This all comes together into a hybrid form in the cyberspace. So applying maximum violence towards the center of gravity of the people, so attacking the center of gravity, attacking the infrastructures, making their lives a living hell, making the system not being able to cope with the changes, and apply that to the cyberspace. Right now, we are talking about a global's fires doctrine. That's the new direction where this is going to flow. A global's fire doctrine is a way to capitalize on all the different dimensions of war, and that includes having a greater synergy, a greater system synergy between the cyberspace and the outer space, and I'm talking about the weaponization of satellite links. So, out of the terminology of hybrid and cyber, cybrid is born. Cybrid is hybrid warfare in the cyberspace. And it's interesting to see when we look at the Harvard University, this is a Belfer Center study on cyber index power, to see that there are a couple of scores here. There is one row for offensive scores and one row for defensive scores. Of course, we never know exactly if the numbers are real or not, because this is an estimative, of course. But what we can say from the data that we have is that the United States have a more destructive power in terms of cyber, and China has a stronger defense. Interestingly, Britain is also on the top on the destructive, but it's low on defense. But France is not. France is the opposite. And why is that? How come France is more prone to defend rather than to attack? What can we read from this? Well, I'll go to it. In 2022, the same cyber index power from Harvard University saw something different. Saw a climb of China in terms of surveillance, and we know exactly what this means with the great Chinese canon, their new cyber sovereignty modus operandi. And we saw that Australia also gone up into the ranking. They're also on the top with defense, just after Ukraine. The destructive power is still ranked top by the United States. After that, Russia. United States, Russia and China, Russia down on defense, up on destructive. What can we read? What exactly is this about? Is this a strategy, or is this just the choice of the nations conducting war through the use of their private partners? Well, when we train our officers, we normally tell them that there are different ways to see this. The cyberspace is composed of multiple operating domains, and we replicate those domains in the cyberspace. So we have land systems, air systems, maritime, and space. And we have what we call the abiotic factors and the biotic forces. I don't know if anyone studied biology here, probably not, but abiotic factors, these are lent from biology. And abiotic factors are the environment conditions. An environment in the cyberspace is everything except legislation and the actors. Everything that is not abiotic is therefore a biotic force, and biotic are the actors and the interaction between those actors. And this is the ecosystem that we work on. So there are two theories. We have the Colchester model. The Colchester model is prone to nations that are more defensive in the cyberspace. They say, according to the Colchester evolutionary model, that a nation will conduct their operations according to the environment. They are normally preys, and I'm talking about preys and predators. Preys normally are conditioned by their environment. If there will be a technological revolution, for example, quantum computing, that will change the environment. And that may or may not be an instrument of war later on, but that will first change the environment. And then there is the Red Queen's hypothesis, which is a zero-sum game. It's normally used to express to express cyber power by predator actors. And predator actors are the ones with the highest level of destruction. Normally, the United States of America, Ukraine, Russia, and now China as well. So the Red Queen is opposite to the Colchester. The Red Queen says that the abiotic factors, the environment, has nothing to do with power. Power is only resulted from instruments of war. If there is a strong enough technology, malware, virus, a tactic, a technique, and a procedure that is useful and can actually render value, leverage results, then that will be a biotic instrument of war. So the environment is the same. These people, they don't care about the environment. They will not condition the environment. They will impose their will through instruments of power. Those are the predators. The problem with the predators is that this will lead us to an arms race, because normally nations that work in the Red Queen hypothesis, they try to race for cyber primus inter pares. They try to be the best at what they are. They try to have monopoly of cyber destruction power. And that cyber destruction power can have multiple iterations. It doesn't need to be destruction of the nuclear reactor cores of Iranian nuclear stations. It may be something completely different that we haven't seen before. But that's the problem with this, because nations that tend to be more destructive will start a loop of violence that will not end. It cannot end. Because when a predator preys, a defensive nation needs to use all of its capacity just to perpetuate their condition in the future. Because it's very difficult for an actor that is defensive to impose their will on the cyber superpowers. And we see this right here. The United States offensive, its states, and China defensive. The Chinese, they've interiorized the concept of Sun Tzu. Win by not waging war. So you can win by not attacking. Be indirect. Don't force a decisive victory. The United States instead, they denounce a preemptive cyber capability because they are so publicly open about their cyber destructive power. And it's a strategic, they believe in decisive victories. Well, decisive victory is quite a claim. We cannot say that. We cannot say in the cyberspace there are decisive victories. What does that mean? Well, a decisive victory, if we transport that into naval warfare, decisive victory in naval warfare meant the only thing, the complete and total destruction of the armada of our enemies. In the cyberspace would be exactly the same. The complete and total destruction of the cyber capabilities of our adversaries. We would put them in the primitive age. That's not the type of war that the West wants to conduct. So China has, because China is a defensive nation, mostly, they've decided to, if they cannot fight as equals to the United States and to the NATO nations, they decided to control their abiotic environment. So that's exactly what they did. They decided to close their internet, generate and control all the elements and factors that goes in and goes out, so that they will be cyber primus inter pares within their cyberspace sovereignty. Russia model is exactly the same. They call it the RUNET, Russian Internet, or intranet, because actually it's more an intranet than an internet. And it started in 2012. And then we had Roscommodore blacklist all enterprises that were not Russian, that were foreigner, and that could provide private services to RUNET and from RUNET. And it came to be in 2019 with the change of the legislation, which passed in a flash. It was one of the fastest legislation in the Duma to be approved, where they declared the Russian cyberspace to be sovereign. And we were talking just a moment before I came into the stage about sovereignty of data. Sovereignty of data is absolutely key for us to understand where we are going. Because Russia is also not a destructive power. They behave defensively, so they need to control the cyber environment. And they just did that. But this is not an expression of democracy. How can you close a cyberspace and call it a democracy? No. You can protect the cyberspace, but you cannot ensure complete freedom. There can never be complete freedom. But what the RUNET did is control access out and in. And that is particularly damaging to all Western companies that legally want to do business in Russia. So because of this, Anonymous, let me go back. Anonymous declared war to Russia in the beginning of the war. And declared war to Russia because on the left side, you will see most of the hacking groups, the centralized hacking groups that are currently working with Russia. And on the right side, you'll see the Ukrainian Western ones. But Anonymous declared war on Russia because those groups on the left, they are actually groups, they are masks of the intelligence services of Russia. This has been well documented, excuse me, and they are normally operated by handlers. These handlers have a direct connection to the Ministry of Intelligence, to the Ministry of Defense, and to the Department of Intelligence. And they are commanded by multiple people, and I'll talk about it and I'll describe them to you later to the end of the presentation. So when we talk about NotPetya attacks that block our industries, that disrupt our nations, and that are perpetrated with APT-29, for example, or Gameron, we're not talking about decentralized hacking groups, we're talking about Russian intelligence services. And these are the type of attacks that are most common nowadays that target our nations. Essentially, DDoS and leaks and defacements. Is that the problem for us? Well, not necessarily, but ransomware is for sure. When you encrypt a hard drive and you stop a company from operating, that will break the resilience of our people, of our nations. That's the problem that NATO needs to deal with, and I'm not sure that NATO is currently prepared to deal with a security issue rather than a defense issue. So, I normally say that the first tumbling rock starts when democracies, in order to protect themselves, start behaving as autocracies, creating data sovereignty, which is important, but going one step beyond, creating cyber sovereignty, closing the internet. Because security cannot be our maximum. Our maximum needs to be liberty, freedom, democracy in security. And we cannot forget that there was someone that said, and democracies are open to this, I won in democracy, by democracy, and through democracy. It was Adolf Hitler. He did all of this, and then he changed democracy as we know it today. So we need to be careful when we talk about data sovereignty and cyber sovereignty, not to fall into the same mistakes as Russia and China, closing ourselves to mimic what they have done. So there is one way for the West. Probably you're going to ask me, well, if China and Russia are defensive, are we offensive? No. We are a hybrid model. We are a dual-track model. And the way we do business, or the way we do cyber defense, is to use private companies' capabilities. For example, Starlink is a good one, to provide open access information and open access internet to countries and locations that do not have it. So this is one way to do it. The other way to do it is to use non-aligned teams of people, anonymous hackers, which are political agents, and they are normally the people that defend fundamental rights. And people talk about freedom of speech, privacy. Okay, that's good. What about the right to obscurity? Obscurity is in our it's in our constitutions. It's not written obscurity, but it's the right to be forgotten. The right to be forgotten is a fundamental right of our democracies. And this type of agents, they help reform democracy. They are anti-revolutionists, but they help reform. And they are very important. And they don't exist openly in China, or in Russia, or in any other autocratic nation. So because of this, NATO doesn't do cyber war, NATO does cyber defense. And the way to do cyber defense is to make sure that all nations in the alliance have the same level of requirements, that they are interoperable, and that their doctrine, their training, their organization, their logistics, their capabilities are at least at the same base level so that they can build upon. And they build upon based on different exercise programs. NATO cyber defense is also based on the CCDCOE. That's the Cooperation Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Estonia. It was created in Estonia in 2008 because Tallinn, as you remember probably in 2007, was targeted of a mass cyber attack that disrupted the entire city. There was a massive blackout of 5 hours. It was absolutely terrible crash. There were car crashes. It was terrible. And because of that, NATO decided to create the CCDCOE, and now they are our javelin spearheads into the defense of the alliance. In 2016, NATO has declared the cyberspace an operational domain, and it is now conceived as a domain of war. So if it's a domain of war, we need to be prepared to defend it. But NATO does not have capabilities. The people with capabilities are the nations. So in the news, when we see people saying, NATO is conducting war, well, no, the nations that belong to NATO, the nations are conducting war because they are the ones with the capabilities. And in 2021, the Allies endorsed the comprehensive cyber defense policy, and now it's a planning domain. So there are 4 big responsibilities in terms of cyber defense in NATO. There is the sharing of real-time information. So NATO conducts joint intelligence missions to understand exactly who are the adversaries and how do they operate. They do rapid reactions of cyber defense teams. These are CIS, so this is Communication Information Systems. And they develop targets so that the alliance may target and may defend. So it's more of an cyber intelligence rather than actually an active defense shield. And lastly, they invest in education. That education is based on exercises, and those exercises have been growing and being more modernized as time goes by. And we're talking about the cyber defense exercises. Some of them are command post exercises. Others are live exercises, live fire. And they tend to do data mining, data scraping, counter-threat network. And the cyberspace for NATO needs to be directly conducted or directly linked to the operations in the lands, to the operations in the maritime, in space. So it needs to make sense. There's no cyber isolated. There is joint training. And these are more or less the levels. We have political level exercises. It's called CMX. That's crisis management exercise. It's for political level, it's for ambassadors. It tests cyber connections, and it tests how the political decisions can communicate with each other in a degraded cyber environment. Then we have the strategic level. Javelin 2017 was the first exercise to actually include cybrid threats, and it's for the strategic commands of the alliance. And then we have the cyber coalition. The last 2 ones, operational and tactical levels, cyber coalition and lock shields is what I would like to talk to you about. Because these are the key exercises that NATO has in terms of cyber to actually achieve proactive results. Do we still have time to pass a video? Yes. I don't know if it's possible to click on that. It's just 1 minute of your time. Just need to click it, I think. If there's no mouse, there's no. No, it's just the last one. So, but I'll entertain you while Carlos is doing this. Lock Shields is then in Tallinn. It's the center of gravity of cyber defense. And they have multiple teams of the private sector. And this is the big difference. Well, Cyber Coalition, the first one on the operational tactical one, is conducted by the military. The last one, Lock Shields, is conducted by you, the experts. It's conducted by the private sector. Because, as I told you, in the West, we do not conduct offensive and defensive wars. It's not the court jester model or the Red Queen hypothesis. It's both combined. It's both combined. And what we do is we attempt to control the cyber environment to protect ourselves. At the same time that we develop the strategic tools to degrade our adversaries. And Lock Shields is the combination of military strategy and the private sector. So the teams that you will see in the short video, and they have different color shirts, and that's the first one, right?
Exercise Cyber Coalition is NATO's dedicated cyber defense exercise. At the technical level, tactical level, operational level, and actually at the strategic level for cyber practitioners from NATO nations, from NATO partner nations, from NATO entities, and from NATO partner entities to come together to exercise warfare capability development in and through cyberspace. It's really, really gratifying that all the hard work and preparation that's preceded this for the best part of a year has now reached fruition. And on top of that, the feedback is coming in now. It's really, really positive. It's really, really exciting. Of course, a good thing can always be better, so we're keen to get all sorts of feedback, and that feedback is going to be fed into the future exercise planning. What I would say is that CC doesn't stand for cyber competition, it stands for cyber coalition.
So as you've seen, this is the cyber coalition. It's conducted essentially by military, and you've seen the installations. Computer desktops, military in uniform, trying to do their scenario, trying to run their
If you used to live in the UK but now live in Spain,
trying to run their exercises. What you will see now is what, in my opinion, is the best type of exercise that we can ever achieve. It's the culmination of the commercial and private sector with the military strategy. And this is what it's all about. It's about rendering our capabilities through the private sector. It's rendering our capabilities to our academies, through our universities. This is bringing young experts into the field of cyber defense. And that's an expression of democracy, of course. If you can run the second one. Yeah, please.
The world as we know it is under attack. You must defend yourself or risk losing it all. Cyber is here to stay.
With more than 2,000 participants and over 5,500 lifelike systems under constant attack, Locked Shields is the world's largest and most complex live fire exercise.
Our primary goal is to give our primary training audiences to experience what it's like to act when their country is under cyber attack.
It takes place in the home of NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, located in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, a country with a population less than half of that of Berlin. What makes it the single most complex cyber defense exercise out there? Simple.
We build an artificial country that we've called Borrelia,
where 24 blue teams from 32 countries all over the world compete to defend their nation from highly diverse cyber attacks.
Locked Shields refers to ancient close battle formations where you actually use your shield not only to protect yourself, but the soldier next to you.
The 400 members of the organizing green, yellow, and white teams spent around 100,000 man-hours to prep the exercise, with more than 8,000 live fire attacks conducted by the opposing red team.
Good morning, blue teams. I have just one thing to say to you. Good luck.
The game world is closely based on the real world, with problems which are all too real. Banking, power and water grids, satellites, air defense and communication networks, and worst of all, users. Users who need to have access to the systems, yet whose actions can make life a living hell for the defenders. Adding further realism and tension, the teams must grapple with active information and media war, as well as legal challenges. The attacks are designed based on real events from the past years, drawing on the know-how and expertise of the tech and defense industry and various startups. Locked Shields is a 2-day training event where teams are pushed to the edge of their abilities to fend off attacks against vital national infrastructure.
Be part of Locked Shields. We're glad to train you.
If you used to live in the UK...
So that was the two different type of exercises that NATO conducts. So Lock Shields is, before we go there, Lock Shields is this merge of capabilities, civil and military. And these people, they are representatives of different industries that then sell their services to the Alliance and to our nations. And it's a live fire event where for 2 days they try to attack, the red teams try to attack the beryllium sweat systems. And they actually have, the systems are encrypted with state-of-the-art crypts and state-of-the-art codes. And they actually, the event of hacking into it and creating problems is real. And we need to exploit the hacking part so that we can develop what we call in the business systems immunity towards those actions. In the past, these exercises, they take 3 years to be built. Every single exercise took 3 years before. And the level of detail goes into the color of the eyes of the leader of the country. It's very precise. And I cannot bring you all the information because it's classified, but in 2017 we had a country, much like Sweden, and it's like Sweden and Finland merged into one big federation. And there was an attack on, there was an annexation, illegal annexation of Norway. And I will cut the conversation short. There was this guy called, this organization called the Baltic Buddy, which was a disinformation campaign that was operating in the PMESI environment. The PMESI is the political, military, economical, social, information, and infrastructure environment. And they were able to generate massive chaos, and NATO and the private sector worked together in order to untangle all the chaos. So for each PMESI, there was a troll factory. That troll factory had a director. Those directors had managers. Those managers had groups. And we had to replicate this across the red teams. This was a massive event. It was in 2 days. NATO conducts real war games in 15 days. And this is the level of detail that it goes to. So it needs all to be replicated in the cyber environment that we create just for the case. Another example is the type of weaponization that we can look at during the exercises in order to train our officers that you pay tax for, and in order to train our private sector. So we're talking about defending the command and control. These guys would target the intelligence collection. They would try to protect, secure, and prevent the defense system, so the secret networks. And they would try to degrade, deny, disrupt, destroy all the different logistics of the operation. And sometimes, when the exercise went very good, they would actually degrade the exercise, and we would have to stop in order to double-check what we needed to do to fix the problem. Those are the best exercises, of course. The commanders, the generals, they hate it because they need to justify a fault in their operations. So when it comes to the Atlantic posture, and I'm finishing, we need to remember that the West, as an expression of democracy, of liberal democracy, needs to invest in destructive power, but should not use it. It can only use destructive power when it is sure that, that the enemy will be rendered incapable. Otherwise, it will start a perpetual loop that will end with a zero-sum game. Zero-sum, no one wins. So that's one way. The other track is to achieve systems immunity. We are attacked. It's okay. If it's non-attributable, it's okay. If it's attributable, then we use our foreign ministries to try to tackle it. We study the attack, we develop systems immunity, and we become stronger. Because in cyber attacks, when you use the trump cards, you will create defenses, and it will not work again, in principle. So in order to counter cybrid warfare, these are the 5 principles. Know your enemy. Know their capabilities. Do not return fire, otherwise you'll join the Red Queen's hypothesis and perpetuate the conflict. study the adversary's weaknesses and improve upon your own. And finally, attack only when you can neutralize the enemies to return fire. And that's it. That's simple, but that's the result of many different exercises that NATO conducts in order to improve the capabilities and the defenses of our democracies. I hope the talk was of your interest. I'm open to any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. Really interesting information. I was wondering, where's Spain in terms of the defensive capabilities? Because we've seen Spain appearing in the other side, in offensive, but I'm a bit worried about the other. I don't know if you have some data that.
Yeah. So I didn't bring all the index, but Spain is one of the strongest cyber offensive countries in terms of. Without going into the superpower region, Spain is one of the strongest and most well capable. But more than that, and this is very interesting, Spain is a very valuable ally because Spain is one of the major providers of cyber legal experts. And Valencia, there's a lot of young scientists and lawyers coming from Valencia, and they are excellent in understanding if there is a cyber problem, a cyber issue, a cyber attack, what are the legal implications? How can we solve it? Because if we cannot tell our companies when you are attacked what you need to do in terms of legal, how can you protect yourself legally, how can you protect your customers' data, then what type of defense are we talking about? Defense of military infrastructure? Well, military exists to fight. I understand. War is not only about fighting numbers, otherwise it would be mathematical war. No. War is about the incubation of maximum violence in policy through the expression of a war, a fight, a clash. To answer you directly, sir, Spain is one of the strongest within our southern nations, is one of the strongest together with Italy. Portugal, on the other hand, and I can talk about it because I'm Portuguese, Portugal, on the other hand, we don't have the technology to scale up capabilities like Italy and Spain. No way. We mimicked the French model of defense, trying to improve our defense, providing training on defense systems. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that also depends on the environment. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. It was a very insightful presentation. And I have a question. Given the capability of invoking Article 5, what mechanisms exist to obtain sufficient level of assurance of the attacker, to identify who attacker actually is? Because as we know, today's cyber attacks do not necessarily come directly from the source. They use proxies. And my second question, would you flip back to the previous slide? I didn't have time to take a picture of that. Thank you.
I don't know if it's working anymore. Can you cycle back? Okay, thank you very much for your questions. Absolutely true. When there is an attack, most of the cases is non-attributable. We don't know who attacked. It's very difficult to actually do cyber forensics and understand exactly, oh, that was the actor, that was the target. However, as you've seen from the index, China and the United States are on the top in terms of surveillance. I must not need to remember you about Edgar Snowden and the tailored access operations that the US were preparing, tapping phones without court mandates. There are many ways to actually achieve that level of attributability, if I can use the term. The Five Eyes is an organization created by English-speaker nations. 5 nations, 5 eyes. We're talking about Canada, United States of America, United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia. These guys share intelligence at the level that we in the Alliance can only imagine. There is complete interoperability of intelligence. And we, unfortunately, there is no coalition for us to share cyber intelligence on our adversaries and our enemies. That's a problem, and that's a topic of discussion that maybe if the nations don't start, maybe the private sector should start, because it's also a business opportunity to create this federation of systems. When it comes to the second part, you have it here. I don't know if you have a subsequent question on this, but if an Article 5 would be activated, it would not be activated immediately. Upon a great disaster, Article 4 would be summoned and consulted. That's the methodology. So the targeted nation would go to the North Atlantic Council, where all the nation states meet, and they would say, my nation has been attacked, these are the casualties, this was the issues, this is the information we have. We need your help to try to identify the perpetrator. That's it. Once Article 4 is summoned, then the nations will decide collectively if they will activate Article 5. And Article 5 cannot be activated without, well, Article 5 should not be activated without evidence about it, but we cannot forget what happened in the invasion of Iraq, and the proof was not there. I hope I answered your question.
Congratulations for the speech. I have only one question. How are these scores about offense and defense power calculated? I don't expect a detailed.
Absolutely. So the methodology that Harvard used had to do with 2 perceptive metrics. One was perception. What is the perception of the public based on that power? The other one was the use of AI to data mine and data scrap indicators from open access intelligence or open access information. Of course, they being Harvard University, they build a cyber index of power every year. And there are changes that actually reflect political or geopolitical evolutions of our lives. They are simply indicators, and they don't necessarily correspond directly to destructive powers, because, as we know, China is very high on their surveillance technology. We know that for a fact. I don't know if you've traveled to Shanghai, they have an AI camera on every corner. It's unbelievable. You go to London and to certain parts of the United Kingdom, and you see young people wearing sweatshirts with strange patterns, not to be identified by AI cameras. This is complicated, and we are reaching a point in our lives that we, as the public, we need to be careful if we walk in the streets and if we want to protect our right of obscurity to be forgotten by the state or by those taking information. So it's based on, and I'm sure that Harvard would explain the methodology much better than I did, but it's based on indicators, data mining and data scraping activities that they have conducted at the Belfer Center. If you want, I can share you the sources, and you can go into the Cyber Index, and to all of you as well. I think it's a very interesting study.
So thanks for your presentation, very interesting. I was wondering, I saw in your slides there were UN logos, so I would like to ask you about the role of the UN in this warfare.
Excellent question. So, it was on the back here, right? Yeah, right here. When NATO replicates, when NATO needs to train with what we call the white cell, célula branca. Porquê? What is the célula branca? That's the block of people that are experts from organizations that are not part of NATO. So we have one real representative from the European Union, one real representative of the United Nations, a staff, not a member of the Assembly, of course, a staff. We have refugee committee representative, and then we bring people from OSCE, Europol, Interpol, the Red Cross, and the Red Crescent. We have to bring all of these representatives to give a proper level of credibility to the exercises. The exercises are not only for the military, they are also for the trainers that are training the military. We need to learn how to train our people, otherwise we will fail to train them in the future. And by bringing these experts and by bringing partners, we work a lot with IBM as well, by bringing this type of partners, we ensure that our exercises are actually state-of-the-art and they reflect what the experts say. I haven't seen ISACA there and I haven't seen this community there, but there's definitely a place for all of you in this type of exercises. And not only in NATO exercises, but also in the European Union exercises. Because, and I get this question a lot from the public sometimes, in the West, we have the blessing of having a defensive alliance, whatever you may think about NATO, and then you have an economic superpower. Together, if NATO and the European Union are able to communicate strongly and are able to cooperate, then we'll be able to defend democracy through economy, through our imposition of our Western economic model, which is open markets, and defending our way of life through military means, without necessarily the military means influencing the economic model. Because in Russia, there are only two pillars. Or you have a lot of security, or you have a lot of freedom. But if you have freedom, you don't have security, and you have security, you don't have freedom. China is the same thing. But in the West, it's not the same. And we keep saying, we cannot have freedom without security. Well, exactly. We can't. So that's why we have two different organizations working independently in order to provide the best that they can.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for your presentation. Finalizamos aquí y mi entrada al nuevo ponente. Un aplauso.